Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Alex, and this is the Equity Odyssey podcast. And today I have the pleasure of getting to interview Jonathan Hayek. Jonathan is a former school teacher, currently a commercial real estate investor. He is the managing partner at Endurance Properties, and he is the host of The Source of Commercial Real Estate. So, Jonathan, super excited to have you.
Great to be here, Alex. Can't wait to have this discussion.
Awesome, man. So, the Equity Odyssey, one of the main things that I really wanted to dive into when starting this podcast is kind of digging into your backstory, how you got started, the challenges, and kind of laying out that path for others too. So, would you mind for the audience kind of laying out your backstory and how you got to where you are now?
Sure. Yeah, I grew up in the Midwest in Illinois, and right out of college, my first job was as a special education teacher. My dad was a teacher, and I assume that's probably why I went the teaching route initially. Teaching is a great profession, lots of security, long-term stability, benefits, regular W-2 income. But I got to a point where I realized that the financial upside of being a teacher and even as an administrator, I eventually got my master's thinking maybe I'd be a school principal or, school administrator, superintendent, something like that. Even the upside of, being maxed out on the pay scale as a teacher or a principal was not going to get me and my family where we wanted to go. And so, as I was teaching, about 10 years into teaching, I started flipping houses on nights, weekends, and holidays. And so my goal was, I was inspired by bigger pockets. My goal was to start flipping houses and use the capital generated from flipping to buy small multifamily properties. So duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and to build this empire of small multifamily properties. And it worked for a little while. I was successful in flipping and was able to generate some rental income through small multifamily properties. And then I realized all of the management requirements of these small multifamily properties. And so decided to sort of dip my toe into some commercial property. So bought an office building, and today I am focused on small industrial single tenant properties. And so happy to go into why I transitioned there, but I'm no longer teaching. I was able to use my rental income to replace my teaching income back in 2019. And so now in real estate full time and just enjoying the financial and geographical freedoms that real estate provides.
Yeah, totally. I would definitely I want to dig into why you chose that asset class and the advantages and disadvantages of it. But before that, when you got you start flipping houses, was this something, you were doing the work on, you hired that out, or what did that look like?
I did a lot of the work myself. Early on, I think I did a pretty good job of knowing my limits. And so I can do things like tile showers and paint and lay flooring and things like that. But when it comes to plumbing and electrical and roofing, that slightly more technical stuff, I leave it to the professionals. And so over time, as I did more deals, I generated a good list of reliable subcontractors that I could call for different types of things. And so, but I think for people, especially for people starting out, if you have, a little bit of handiness or you're willing to watch some YouTube videos and try stuff, you can save so much money and, in turn make so much more money on your properties if you're willing to do some work yourself. So even something simple like painting. I mean, a small, interior paint job might cost you if you hired it out. It might cost you $6,000 or $8,000 if you hired a real painter. Whereas if you do that yourself, it might take you, a few days or a week, and you might spend $500 on supplies. And so, I think just little things like that, if you can be scrappy and you're willing to use your time and willing to learn some skills, I think you can really fast forward your growth if you're willing to do some work yourself.
Awesome. Awesome. So that's super cool. And How did you fund these first couple flips? Was this just saved up from your regular job, or was there something else?
Was very scrappy early on. And so, as I got more deals under my belt, I was able to establish relationships with some local banks. And so, when things were good, I was flipping houses. I had a 4.5% interest rates on these house flips. It was beautiful, but certainly not getting those types of rates now. But, early on, it was, there were a handful of friends and family who I had talked to about real estate, and they were willing to invest as private money lenders in some of my deals. I would use home equity lines of credit to fund deals, and I would even do things, use like credit cards. So, not recommending this to other people, but I would use credit card balance transfers and 0% purchase periods on credit cards. And so I was working with my wife, and she's very detail oriented, and she can keep track of deadlines. And so if you want to go the credit card route, very important to keep track of deadlines and know your interest rates. But so early on, it was very scrappy. And I think, for other people starting out, it takes scrappiness. And so whether you're using some money from friends and family or credit cards or talking with local banks or using your W-2 income, it just takes a lot of scrappiness to get started.
Yeah, awesome. I really like that advice. And um yeah, the scrappiness is everything in the beginning. So something that is seems to be a common theme, is obviously real estate deals take a little bit of money. And a lot of people start with that their sphere of influence, friends, family, right? Um before I ever reached out to any friends or family, tried to raise any money, it seems so unrealistic for me to try to raise money from friends and family. And I kind of feel that same sentiment that a lot of other people have. They're like, oh, that's, not realistic, but never really tried. Do you have any advice for those people or anything to say to them?
I mean, one piece of advice is just to be a good listener. The first deal that I got private lending on was a family friend that I've known for a very long time, and he had a self-directed IRA, and he was looking to invest in real estate with the self-directed IRA. We were talking about this before I had ever even done a deal, and he said something casually like, "Yeah, I'd love to invest in some real estate with the self-directed IRA." It was like, $110,000, not lots of money, but not nothing. And so then I got my first deal and I went back to him and I said, "Hey, I remember you saying something about wanting to invest in real estate in your self directed IRA. I have this deal. Here's the plan. Here's when you'd potentially get your money back. Do you have any interest in it?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure. Sounds good." And so, at that point, then I went to an attorney and I had an attorney draft up a promissory note and a mortgage. And so, everything was on paper of, about what we were doing. And so, I think just, that initial deal was just listening. And so I had, before that first deal, I really didn't know it was possible to, borrow money from friends and family to do real estate deals. But the lender actually came to me and, he explained it to me. And so that's how that first deal worked. And I would say since then, that was probably the easiest deal that I've ever raised for. It is, there's a lot of hesitance out there. And so you don't want to be desperate when you're raising money. And you just want to be a good listener and match a good opportunity with the right person looking for that opportunity. There are people out there with hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in their checking account. The money is literally doing nothing. And you might have these discussions, but they might also have zero interest in investing in real estate. And so, those are the types of relationships that you just nurture and you just build relationships, but you don't want to, you certainly don't want to force anyone to
Mhm.
invest in something that they're not comfortable with. And so just listening, nurturing relationships and being available when the timing is right for those people.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. Yeah, I like that advice about just kind of like off your back foot, not really being too pressure or like pushy. Because if you do that, it's like there's no way to win. Even if they do invest and they're like they're gonna be very like uncomfortable the entire time. And if they don't invest, you're kind of souring that relationship too. So yeah, that's I really like that. So started flipping some houses, buying some small multifamily, and didn't really like the tenant headaches or the management, at least responsibilities. Um, I guess what were some of the early challenges that you had with either the small multifamily or the flipping?
You know, flipping is just you don't know what you don't know. And
Yeah.
so, I sort of have a handy background, but I don't have I'm not a contractor. And so going through the permitting process and inspections and things like that, and just how relationships really can rule the world in that space of, you might get an inspector that's had a bad day and comes down with all kinds of ridiculous requirements at an inspection. And so then, if you've got a good contractor working for you, and has a relationship with that inspector, that contractor can really pull some strings and say, "Oh, come on, we don't need an engineer's letter to do this. This should be grandfathered in." And so, me as a nobody, saying that to an inspector is probably not going to go anywhere. But contractor with a relationship really can make a difference. And then, on the small multifamily side, I think, there's I was always really particular about tenant selection. And so, I've certainly learned the lessons through other people about the tenant headaches of, selecting the wrong tenant. I've had to do one eviction, and that was with a tenant I inherited. And so I've never had to evict a tenant that I've selected. And so, just, being really careful and understanding that no tenant is better than the wrong tenant. And so if it takes you an extra week or two or three to fill an apartment, that is much better than filling it quickly with the wrong tenant. And so you get to learn about people through those initial conversations on the phone, and you can sort of start to see through some of their stories and where their stories don't quite line up with reality. And then, just scaling, I think one of the biggest lessons was that it's very difficult to scale small multifamily. Because I think, I built up to at one point 22 or 24 units. And, they're scattered all over town. And I was investing in somewhat of a small town. But even still, if you've got multiple calls in a day, and I was self managing. And so if I'm bouncing around a couple different properties, taking care of little things or posting tenant notices. It can really be a big time suck. And so the obvious solution to that is get a property manager to take care of your properties for you. But I was not willing to pay a property manager to do a mediocre job or a less than mediocre job managing my properties. And so I always self-managed. And so, yeah, those were some of the challenges that I faced.
That's hilarious because I'm facing all those challenges right now. Yeah. So no, that's awesome. Um, yeah, I've got about half the units that you had for when you were doing the small multifamily, but yeah, it's I'm out of state too, trying to self-manage, and you have that thing like, do I just hire a property manager? Are they going to do the same quarterly inspections that I do? Like, are they going to care as much? It's a lot of question marks. So from there, you decided to transition into what asset class?
So my first non-residential deal was an office building. I bought a vacant office building.
Hmm, that's exciting. What did you end up doing with the vacant office building?
Yeah, so I was really just interested in what it was like to invest in non-residential deals. So this was listed for about $500,000. Very high trafficked part of town, about 20,000 cars per day would drive past. And this building just sat and sat and sat, and I would drive past it all the time. And I looked at it with my broker and kind of sat on it for a little while, and then eventually made an offer and closed on it. And so my original thought was that, okay, I've got this vacant office building. It was divided into these separate, like executive suites, like, 12 by 14 size offices. And my thought was that, well, it must be a lot like multifamily. I can just lease these out to small businesses needing office space. And that is what I did. There were tons of lessons learned on that property. Things like it's going to take longer to lease out an office than it takes to lease out an apartment. That was not clear to me at the start, but it was certainly a lesson as I went on. And then, tons of other lessons like what do office tenants want in a building? How do you formulate a commercial lease? What does that structure look like? What do tenants want in a lease? What do they want in a property? And so I self-managed that, bought it vacant, did some cosmetic upgrades, like remodeled the bathroom and did some painting and flooring, things like that. And eventually got it leased up and sold it to another investor and made some money on it. Now, I am not anxious to buy another office building. I think there really can be an opportunity in these small office buildings. This was about 5,000 square feet. Um, I think there really can be a opportunity in these small office buildings of leasing up small offices to local small businesses. But like multifamily, there is a fair amount of management that happens. Somebody gets, I was getting calls like somebody got locked out of their office. And so I'm sitting at home and someone's locked out of their office. Hey, can you come let me into my office? And I'm like, well, I guess so. And so, I could have handled that differently. Like, yeah, you can call a locksmith and, you can foot the bill for that. But so things like that, cleaning common areas, cleaning the bathroom regularly, making sure it's presentable and looking good for the tenants to bring clients in. So lots of lessons learned there. It was a great property, a great first commercial property to learn those lessons about property management for commercial properties and leases and finding tenants. How do you find tenants and how do you find the price point, the right price point? And so I held on to that property for about 18 months and then used the proceeds of that to buy a small industrial building. And that's largely where my focus is today, is in small industrial.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Small industrial. How to, I guess, give the listeners a little description on small industrial and how that might differ from, retail, office, things like that.
Sure. So industrial properties are these very unsexy properties that you like drive by on the road or the freeway and you don't even give a second thought to. These are the types of properties that you might have a granite fabricator in, or a cabinet maker, or a plumber, or a window installation guy, or a landscaper. The properties I'm focused on are single tenant. So there's only one tenant that occupies the whole building. There's generally a small section of office, and then there's a much larger warehouse section with some roll up doors, maybe a dock door. These properties are somewhere in the, you know, I like around 10,000 square feet. And these are on net leases. So you may have heard the term triple net lease. So these the tenants pay for taxes, insurance, and maintenance. And so the great thing about these single tenant properties is that the tax bill goes directly to the tenant. And the tenant pays property taxes directly. Insurance, the tenant is responsible for insuring the structure of the building, and they pay the insurance bill directly. And then likewise with maintenance, when light bulbs go out, when snow has to be plowed, when the grass has to be cut, anything like that, something like that happens, a drain gets clogged, the tenant is responsible for taking care of all those things. And so it's a very passive investment. It's not 100% passive, but it's much more passive than apartment investing. And so those are some of the reasons that I love this asset class.
Awesome. Awesome. So the tenant maintenance, does that extend to other like larger systems on the building, like maybe HVAC? Does that include that?
A lot of times HVAC is negotiable. Things that I'm responsible for almost across the board are things like roof and structure, sometimes parking lot, sometimes HVAC. HVAC is often negotiable depending on when the HVAC was installed and how long the tenant has been there. So I think, if you have a new tenant moving in and with the new tenant, you replace the HVAC system, I think you have an argument there to make the tenant responsible for HVAC since it was brand new when they moved in. I
Sure.
have one property where the tenant and I negotiated that we're 50-50 on HVAC replacement. The HVAC is not new, but the tenant has been there for like 20 years. And so they didn't want to be responsible for HVAC, but I'm like, guys, you've been here for 20 years and you've been using the HVAC. And so I think you should be responsible. So we finally just hammered out that we'd go 50-50 on HVAC replacement. And so some of those things are negotiable, but by and large, a lot of the cosmetic things and everyday maintenance things, if the drain backs up or a faucet is leaking or a bay door malfunctions or something like that, it's up to the tenant to take care of those things.
Awesome. Okay. And you mentioned it's more passive than the other many other forms of residential real estate. What other advantages draw you to this style of real estate?
The leases are long term. So like this one property that I have, I mentioned that the tenant's been there for over 20 years.
Yeah.
I have another property that the tenant has been there for over 35 years. So these tenants are very sticky because if you think about it, these tenants are responsible for their businesses. They're responsible for people's employment and their livelihood. They also oftentimes have customers that know their location, and so they want to have a consistent location so customers know where to come, know where to find them. If they want to get a new window for a shed or something, they know where to go. Employees want to have a consistent workplace. They want to know where they're working, and likewise, these businesses rely on their employees, and so these long-term leases are really crucial to the business plan. Then another thing is these types of properties are oftentimes in many markets supply constrained. So they're, for the most part, these types of buildings are not being built. You might see multi-tenant flex buildings being built right now, but it's pretty rare for single-tenant flex buildings to be built. And there's a growing demand for them. And so, things like, things I mentioned before, like cabinet manufacturers or plumbers or electricians, these professions are not going away, but they still need a place to work. They need a place to store materials and trucks and a place for the receptionist to answer phones and things like that. And so these types of businesses need a place to work, but they're just not being built, and there's a growing demand for them. And so that's another thing I really like about the asset class.
Awesome. No, those are some awesome advantages. Um, if you had to give someone some advice on, making that transition from residential real estate to, more commercial, more single tenant, flex space kind of style stuff. Obviously there's always going to be a learning curve. It's going to be bumpy and you're going to take your lumps, but what are some tips to maybe make that transition a little bit easier for somebody?
I want to be clear that I'm not anti-residential properties. I still own residential properties. I still flip residential houses. I think flipping is still a great way to generate capital. I'm not somebody that wants to be raising tons of money from strangers and on LinkedIn and Instagram and things like that. That's not my path. I really like generating income myself through flips and buying strategically. And so, if you love residential and that's the way, that's your path forward, that's totally fine. But for someone that's interested in maybe getting started in some industrial properties. Multi-tenant industrial is perfectly fine. I'm also not anti multi-tenant properties. I just really like the passive nature of single-tenant properties. So I would start locally, and I would start small. So I would start talking with local brokers that have some of these listings, either for lease or for purchase, and start talking about lease rates. Hey, if you were to lease this out or put this on the market for lease, what price per square foot would you put it for rent at? Hey, do you know, are there any comps in the area that have leased recently, and what did they lease for? So starting to get an idea about what sort of rent this type of property could generate, and then it's a lot like residential. So you're kind of backing into the numbers. And so if you know, okay, it's going to lease for this much, then this is my monthly amount, this is my annual amount. You could back into a cap rate, or you could back into just, your preferred cash on cash returns. And so you could say, okay, if I want 10% cash on cash returns, it's going to rent for this amount, then the most I can pay is X amount. And so starting to do back of the napkin math like that. And then starting with small deals will help you learn some really important lessons, because you might listen to podcasts, watch YouTube videos, and things like that, but until you do that deal, you don't actually know. And so you're gonna be surprised with some of those first deals. And so if you can learn some great lessons on small deals about how to find tenants, how long it takes to lease up space like this, what kind of rents certain types of properties generate, what types of amenities certain types of tenants desire, you're going to learn tons of lessons, and hopefully you make some money. But if not, you get an education, and you learn your lessons on the small deals, and that way you feel more comfortable when it comes to the bigger deals.
Awesome. That's super good advice. I love that. Okay. So that's kind of where you're at now. When you look out into the future for yourself, the next 10 years, is this something you want to continue with, or where are you headed?
Yeah, I mean, right now, as we talk today, I love these single tenant industrial properties, and I'll buy pretty much anywhere. The fundamentals on these properties are pretty consistent across markets. So I would buy locally, but it doesn't have to be locally. And so I would love to. I mean, my goal is to have $25,000 a month in rental income, and I'd love to do that across 10 properties. And so if I could get 10 commercial properties that are all netting me $2,500 a month, that's kind of my goal. Don't know that I would stop there, but that's kind of the next reach goal that I am working towards right now.
Awesome. That's super cool. Okay. And I know we're coming up on time here a little bit, so just a couple of closing questions here. If somebody was listening to this podcast, what is one thing that you really want them to walk away with after listening to this?
I'd just say some confidence in knowing that you can do big things. I think one of my big uh, limiting mindsets when I was, before I started and in the early stages of my investing was that, well, I can't do this stuff. Real estate investing, that's for other people that know more than me, or have better connections, or have more skills, or have more money. I had all these reasons why I couldn't be successful as a real estate investor or an entrepreneur. And I believed that entrepreneurs were born and not made, and that I just didn't have it. Some people are born with it, and I just wasn't. And that's completely false. I was able to learn skills. I was not great at the start, but I started small, and I learned a little bit more on each deal. And so I just encourage people to have some confidence and embrace where they're at in their investing journey, and know that you're not going to know everything on day one, but learn a little bit as you go, and just take bigger steps with each subsequent deal.
Awesome. Well, Jonathan, that was really awesome, and honestly, I took a lot from this, and I hope others did as well. So, is there anything else that we didn't cover on this podcast that you would like to cover?
No, I mean, I think you asked some great questions, and I just like to encourage listeners, if you're just starting out and want to learn more, to use those resources, whether it's podcasts or books, or whatever it is, to learn as much as you can. You're not going to learn everything through YouTube and podcasts and books, but learn enough to be dangerous, and then take the plunge on a deal to learn some lessons.
Awesome, awesome. And I will link your podcast in the description, but where else can people reach out to you, or where would you like to direct people?
Sure. You can learn more about me at jonathanhayek.co. That just kind of outlines who I am, a little bit about my portfolio, and how you can get in touch with me.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jonathan. This really was a pleasure for myself, and hopefully others took value from it as well.
Thanks, Alex. This was awesome.
Yep. All right, you guys signing off.